After covering the final boss villains of Yu Yu Hakusho and the one-off villains of Inuyasha, I thought, why not cover the one-off villains of Yu Yu Hakusho? One-off Yu Yu Hakusho villains are interesting to pick out, since even the most minor villains are memorable despite how little they did overall. You look back and you're like, wait, that guy was only relevant for like half an episode? Huh. So to make the arbitrary call on who falls into the minor or one-off category compared to the more prominent villains, these one-off villains basically only last for an episode or less and never return because they were either too insignificant to reappear as a hero or villain, or they were killed off too quickly. In the end, a lot of it is up to interpretation. Even if they're considered a heavy hitter on their team, they're not safe from being called irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. Now, let's remember the top 10 one-off villains in Yu Yu Hakusho. Number 10, Jaki. Jaki came into the series at the right time to have any form of relevance. Any later point, and he would have been a worthless background demon, but because he came in when Yusuke didn't know he was becoming the spirit detective or that demons even existed in the human world, he posed a threat simply due to a lack of knowledge. Though his timing still could have been better, since if he decided to bother Kuwabara when Yusuke was dead a few days ago, he probably wouldn't have been noticed by anyone. He's a tiny guy who crawls into people's mouths and makes them do evil things. He's not particularly controlling them, but he feeds off their interests and makes them do the not-so-good things in response. Like the main guy he took over, Sakamoto, wanted Kuwabara to steal manga for him as a ransom cost to get his cat back. Now, I'm not saying Jaki can't read and enjoy manga, but I don't think that this demon's first thought in the human world was to catch up on the latest chapter of Hunter x Hunter, so once Jaki has their mind, he just likes to watch the chaos. He doesn't care what you do, as long as it's evil. They really wanted to make him feel like a bad dude, since the main thing that he does is threaten to hurt a cat. No one wants to side with that guy. It also helped boost Kuwabara's good boy points by showing his love of cats and having him merely buy the manga that Sakamoto demanded instead of stealing it. And then Sakamoto throws his goons at Kuwabara because he didn't steal, just to rub in how immoral Jaki's influence is. His downfall is that he puts these clearly not human horns on his human victim's head. I know only those in tune with spirit energy can see them, but if he could repress those for anyone, he could be a little more inconspicuous. The fact that Jaki survived in the human world for as long as he did was somewhat of a miracle, since Sakamoto could not even stand a punch and Jaki could be grabbed and he's automatically detained. I would say he's smart for avoiding capture for that long, but based on his surprise that any human could see him, I would guess that he's actually just lucky. Number 9, Kibano. The Genkai tournament was like a preview of the eventual tournament-heavy nature of the series. It gave us a tournament in shortened form. We got some feats of strength to get into it, had an 8-man bracket where only 3 of the fighters actually mattered, and got some good fights out of it. Obviously, the fights against the main villain of the tournament were the most notable ones, but the rest of the shorter fights still gave us some cool moments. These fights also showed us that tournaments in this universe mean you can use anything. No weapon is limited. This guy brought a knife to a spirit fight. However, none of the human opponents were particularly evil per se, except maybe the knife guy. He was ready to kill. So Yusuke and Kuwabara's opponents that weren't the villain rando more fall under the basic antagonist category rather than full-on villain. While the monk with the tracking shuriken was cool, I'm going with Kibano, who was Yusuke's first opponent in this tournament. We saw plenty of offensive weapons in the tournament, like swords, shuriken, and spirit, but Kibano had more of a defensive weapon. With the first round occurring in pure darkness, he popped on his special mask that heightened his spirit awareness in exchange for his other senses, part of which he already couldn't use because it was in the dark. It was a smart tool, and he fights with wrestling techniques, so he's kind of hype on his own. He chucks Yusuke across the room. Yusuke only wins because he puts a lit cigarette on Kibano's belt to be able to track him in the dark, which is a funny plot point in the anime because manga Yusuke smoked, so he just had his cigarette from earlier, but anime Yusuke did not smoke, so Genkai arbitrarily picked up smoking right before this fight so the cigarette wouldn't just come out of nowhere for this plot point, and then she never smoked again. Also, as someone who used to play the Yu Yu Hakusho card game all the time, interestingly, both guys who Yusuke faced before Rando were listed as villains with the red symbol, while the guy that Kuwabara faced was listed as a hero in blue. Did they just give them villain status because they fought Yusuke? That's kinda rude. There was even a symbol for neutral characters. What did Helmet Guy do that was so evil? Either way, looks like he's a villain in someone's eyes. Number 8. Gamma. Gamma was a part of Team Masho, the third team that Team Urameshi had to face in the Dark Tournament, and by this point in the tournament, we learned that you had a mix of good and not so good people / demons on every team. Just because they all fight to the death doesn't mean that they're not stand-up guys. While Gamma showed no signs of being nice, seeing how the rest of Team Masho turned out, I feel if we got to know him better, he may have not been too bad. Gamma's big gimmick is makeup. He puts makeup on his face and body to enhance his own demonic energy or hinder his opponent. As discussed on my blood manipulator list, he infuses this makeup with his own blood to give it these properties. When covered in the makeup, he gets all the standard power-ups: speed, strength, a red aura. He can also paint symbols on his opponent to ruin their nice white outfit, also because it restricts their movement on their limbs, but the stains are an insult to injury. They make it feel like you have a heavy weight tied to whichever limb he paints it on.
Well, he's kind of ruining the outfit. Kurama picked out a beautiful set of pants and a shirt. He didn't need this other dude to come and mess it up. This isn't art class tie-dye paint your own. Kurama looks good in white. He's but a feather in the air.
My favorite moment is when he goes on a rant in the middle of the fight about how he hates humans' application of makeup for only fashion when they could be enhancing their spirit energy with it instead. You know your friend Michelle who's great with makeup? She could actually be a spirit energy guru if she knew what that was. As a last resort, if Gamma is bleeding, he can use his blood as a curse to seal in his opponent's spirit energy, which ultimately kills himself, but sets up his next teammate to have an advantage, which is actually a pretty noble sacrifice if it was on the right side of the conflict. Though that's why I think Gamma is not that bad of a guy. He was willing to sacrifice himself for the team, and 2 of his team members ended up joining the good guys eventually, and the other 2 weren't as benevolent as other demons that we've seen. Sure, those guys were dirty fighters, but they didn't seem like they would kill you, and that's where the bar is. Maybe Gamma could have been good support later on, but when your final move uses all your blood, I guess it's hard to recover from that. Though I do like how it neatly creates a pattern when it lands on you, makes the stain more bearable. Number 7. Sayaka. The very beginning of Yu Yu Hakusho was an interesting look at the characters. It was not really like what the series eventually became, but it was a nice little paranormal slice of life before we got to the action. There were no real villains in this part of the series. It was more about the trials and tribulations of Yusuke trying to come back to life, so you can't really pinpoint any villains from this time, unless you count that one weird teacher. However, the one character from that time that could fulfill the villain of the day requirement is Sayaka. Now if you just watch the anime, this sounds like it makes no sense, since she was just one of Koenma's investigators there. She came and went. However, in the manga, she was completely different. She was a ghost child who didn't want to pass to the afterlife, so she went around causing mischief and trying to take another child to the afterlife with her so she could play with him and not go alone. She was trying to take the soul of a different kid Yusuke helped during this time named Shota, who was also only in the manga. He could only see Sayaka when she dragged his soul out of his body, but they seemed to have a normal friendship, well, as normal as it could be in this situation. But Sayaka seemed suspicious, since when Yusuke went close to her to tell her that Shota should not be removed from his body, she got mad and blasted him with, evil stuff. She has a sad backstory where she was neglected by her parents, and now she was just afraid to go to heaven. But just like with Yusuke, if someone goes against her wishes, whether it's Shota or someone else, she'll tap into that dark energy. However, after all her theatrics, she was accidentally purified by playing with Shota, and she became a normal ghost girl, incapable of destruction. She was more or less wholesome after that, hanging out with Yusuke and Botan because in the end, she was just a lonely kid. Whatever evil energy they said was controlling her could have just been fear, so it was the nicest possible ending we could get for her. Not sure why they completely changed her in the anime. Even if they didn't want to put Shota in the anime, they could have just replaced him with a different one-off kid and the plot would have been the same. Or we could pretend that this plotline happened off-screen in the anime, and she just got a job in the afterlife after she realized that taking kids' souls was not the best idea. Number 6. Shachi. The last saga of Yu Yu Hakusho, the Three Kings arc, was light on villains. There were plenty of one-off fights, but with the conflict to determine the future king of Demon World being a peaceful tournament, almost everyone was either good or neutral. The two main antagonists of this arc, Mikuro and Yomi, were pretty chill, with Mikuro's camp more being a neutral party who would just let good and evil do their thing, and Yomi's side being more about showing power, making them the more anti-good group. But even so, Yomi doesn't want death and destruction, he just wants order and doesn't care if humans live or get eaten by demons. So with Yomi's crew being the more aggressive faction, he produced a couple of characters that could act as short-term impediments for the heroes. When Kurama was trying to team up with Yomi, Yomi's second-in-command Shachi held the most malice towards Kurama, and was the short-lived antagonist in the way of Kurama getting a spot in Yomi's army to have a positive impact.
Oh no, I like this. He looks good in that outfit.
So now, Shachi has it out for Kurama, with Yomi favoring Kurama over him due to Kurama holding the spirit of the fox demon Yoko. Shachi was destined to lose his second-in-command spot to Kurama, so Shachi pulls out some scare tactics to keep Kurama away. He teamed up with a demon parasite to threaten Kurama's stepbrother if Kurama ever returned to the demon world, but then Kurama just threatened that parasite right back, making Shachi lose his main bargaining chip. So when Kurama upstages him and officially takes his spot, Shachi is just like, fine, I'll kill him, and then Kurama pulls out some quick slashes as a reversal to kill Shachi instead, since we don't have time for a full fight. On one hand, you almost feel bad for him, since Shachi says he just wanted to protect the demon world, leading to his suspicions about Kurama. But on the other hand, he was just jealous that a less violent, more intelligent guy was rightfully taking his place, and he couldn't settle for someone else being better than him. It's also a shame that Shachi has a trident, and we didn't even get to see some cool trident maneuvers from him, but I guess his fate was predictable. Number 5. Makihara possessed by Elder Toguro. This one is definitely a cheat, since it's just one notable character, Elder Toguro, taking over the body of another less notable character, Makihara, aka Gourmet. But the way Elder Toguro re-emerged and was defeated felt like he was just some minor goon who wasn't meant to last. Plus, I just wanted to talk about this fight again, and Chapter Black's arc didn't really have one-off antagonists. All the villains we saw in this arc were notable, being the Sensui 7, getting a full display of their character motives and powers for the most part. The closest we had to pure one-off villains were the Game Master's goblins, I feel. But other than that, Elder Toguro felt like that honorary villain built up to be knocked down easily. Elder Togoro's initial appearance in this arc just felt like a bridge between the Dark Tournament and Sensui appearing, and to show the power gap between the two arcs, as Elder Toguro was rescued from the rubble of the tournament stadium to help Sensui, only to be betrayed by having Gourmet eat him to absorb his power later on, or so it seemed. When Kurama was ready to face off against Gourmet for Gourmet's only fight, Kurama called his bluff right away and knew Elder Toguro actually had full control of his body. Even though Gourmet had Togoro's powers this whole time, it turned out Toguro was too much for Gourmet and took over his mind right after he was eaten. Basically, the whole time we knew Gourmet in his few prior appearances, it was Toguro calling the shots, so he was pulling off the perfect ruse to act no different than normal Gourmet, personality and all. So the only time we really got Elder Toguro as Elder Toguro in this arc was the Kurama fight. And boy, did Toguro pick the wrong time to come back. Kurama just had to fight a kid to the death because of these guys, so he was in no mood to entertain a throwback fight. I don't even think he interacted with Elder Toguro before, so he didn't really care about the memories. Toguro does some of his normal stretchy finger stuff, but Kurama was not playing around and entangles him in the sinning tree, where Toguro was forced to relive almost killing Kurama over and over again for eternity. The sinning tree makes you relive a reoccurring nightmare as it drains your life, so eventually you'll die in the nightmare. But since Elder Toguro is immortal and his life is never depleted, he only gets the reoccurring nightmare, which is him almost killing Kurama, but Kurama comes back to fight every time. I would feel bad for him with this fate if he wasn't so evil. With or without Elder Toguro, Gourmet was still the most minor of the Sensui 7. He was basically just the henchman who helped out the other members, like driving the car or tying up the hostage. Interesting powers aside, Gourmet's main legacy is letting us see Elder Toguro one more time. Number 4, Goki. Goki technically got to fight in 2 episodes, but he was basically only prominent in about half of each one, so it was like he only got 1 episode. Besides, Goki is one of those quintessential early villains that was built to be one-off. You have a basic struggle against him, but then you solve the puzzle on how to beat him in the middle of the fight that gives you insight for later fights. Just like Jackie and the Genkai Tournament Bros, Goki was an introduction to something new for us in the series. He was our first head-to-head fight with a clearly stronger demon. He also had a transformation, though if it wasn't for that, he would be laughably generic. He really only has Hulk smash powers, in more ways than one. Not only does he hit real hard, but he has magical clothes that conveniently don't rip all the way when he transforms. As Yu Yu Hakusho Abridged said, his pants sure know when to stop ripping. Goki's main gimmick is that he stole one of the 3 artifacts of darkness, keeping the orb that absorbs souls, which he proceeds to eat. The souls, not the orb. I think that's a waste of a perfectly good soul, but I guess he can do whatever he wants with them. They don't particularly power him up, they're just snacks. The other 2 artifacts were stolen by Kurama and Hiei, so looking back, this dude really looks out of place considering how far the other 2 characters got. Maybe if he turned good, we'd see his powers develop more like Kurama and Hiei, but since that's not the case, he only has the powers of super strength and losing. At least he does a bunch of big monster stuff that makes him entertaining in the short term, particularly when he grabs a full tree as a weapon. Alas, the tree giveth, the tree taketh away, as his undoing is Yusuke putting a piece of tree in his mouth to hold it open when Goki was about to eat him, so Yusuke could hit his weak point for massive damage with a spirit gun. It's a cool win for Yusuke, but a lame way to go out. Still, it doesn't kill him, so at least he lives up to his rock-hard body description. Though even before that, he showed some signs of weakness, where he was about to kill Yusuke, but Botan pretended to be a bunch of humans with weapons, causing him to run off. Like, was he really that afraid of being discovered, or could a bunch of humans actually take him on? Either way, I can give some of this win to Botan, which I'm always happy to do. Number 3, Genbu. Genbu was the first of the 4 Saint Beasts, all of which were awesome. I covered their motif in my final boss video, so in short, they're based on the 4 deity animals of the Chinese constellations, with Suzaku, the phoenix, being their leader, but regardless of who you pick, they were all cool in both design and powers. The weakest and tied for shortest lived of them was Genbu, the first Saint Beast fought. He acts all tough, but we were later told that he was just the messenger of them for the outside world and wanted to feel important when talking about his strength. That being said, he had me fooled. I thought he looked really strong. Being a turtle snake guy made of stone, he can sink into the stone floors of the Saint Beast's castle and come out anywhere else made of stone. The main issue is, once you learn he can do that, it's pretty easy to avoid him if you're fast enough. He's lost all his sense of stealth. Still, it's cool that he can make up for his lack of speed by essentially teleporting with rock, so he does something smart with his powers. He doesn't really have any special attacks to combine with this though. He just hits you with whatever emerges from the rock first, usually his tail. It's hard to with his fists, since they're about as fast as you'd expect from a giant lumbering rock beast. I like that his only special move is actually enabled by Kurama. When Kurama slices up Genbu with his rose whip, Genbu pulls himself back together and is like, neat, now I can fire the parts of my body at you from where you cut them. Did he know he could do that this whole time, or was he just lucky it didn't kill him, since he immediately adapts to this power? But how often is he actually getting cut up to know that he can do this? Then Kurama tries what seems futile and cuts him up even more, which just gives Genbu more rocks to hurl at you. But it turns out if you keep cutting, you'll eventually reveal Genbu's incredibly telegraphed weak spot. Oh gee, I wonder what happens if I hit this red rock instead of the gray ones. And then he's destroyed when you destroy it. But first, when you remove it, his body can't put itself back together correctly, so he gets rearranged, most notably the head between the legs. Excellent! 10 out of 10. Would kill again. Number 2, Yu Yu Urashima. Yu Yu Urashima is a villain who feels like he did more because he unlocked a major plot point by accident. But in the end, he was just an in-and-out villain. He does the basics, lies about not actually being evil, deceives you as soon as you start to believe him, pulls out his main gimmick, and then his main gimmick backfires on him. He's a pretty unassuming member of Team Urameshi, where the previous 2 teammates that fought before him were giants. Yura is a short, seemingly human fisherman. He telepathically tells Kurama his fake backstory during their fight, and I guess he just has telepathy for the convenience of this exposition. In the dub, he joined the opposing team to raise money for his sick grandmother, and in the original, he joined because his team wanted the theme of being reincarnations of folklore characters, and he fulfills the Urashima Taro role, but everyone except him became evil, and now he wants out. The dub reasoning wasn't actually too far off from the original, since the character he was based on, Urashima Taro, was taking care of his ailing elderly mother in his story. That Urashima was a fisherman too, who, to summarize, rescued a turtle, met the mystical princess Otohime, was given a box he was told never to open, found out that he was accidentally gone for at least 100 years when it only felt like a few days to him, and then proceeded to open the box, which caused him to turn into an old man. Though if 100 years passed, I guess you could just say it caught him up with time. Yu Yu Urashima also has a box of tricks, but this box does the opposite from the folklore and reverses aging. So after he reveals his true plan to deceive Kurama, he puts up a barrier to only have the effects of his box affect those in the ring, so once again plot convenience, and then he thinks he has Kurama cornered. He opens his box to make Kurama younger and weaker. However, he soon learns that because Kurama is the reincarnation of the fox demon Yoko, if you reverse aging too much on him, he just turns into his previous life. And then Yura gets to look pathetic and cower in fear of what he brought upon himself. Yoko doesn't even need to fight him. Yura's own teammate Shishi Wakamaru throws his sword at him and kills him since he was like, well, I've had enough of this guy, revealing that Yura was just a low-level demon disguised as a fisherman this whole time. For all the legends that we heard about Yoko prior to this happening, it's coincidental that this random fake fisherman just so happened to have the item that helps bring him back. Well, technically the clown gave the item to him, but the point is, the item showed up out of nowhere.
I don't like anyone tricking Kurama, but, you know, something good happens from it.
Though, what gets lost in this plot is Yu Yu Urashima weaponizes fishing for his fighting style. Even though it's just a disguise, he wields his fishing rod like it's some sort of whip/sword. He was toe-to-toe with Kurama's rose whip. How long could he have lasted if he just stuck with that? Might have worked out better for him. It was a close call for number 1. Many characters fit the role of seeming very significant in memory, but barely lasted an episode, so I picked the character that was most surprisingly short-lived when looking back. Number 1, Zero. I was conflicted in considering Zero to merely be a minor villain at first. From my memory, I thought he was around more, being the fill-in leader for Team Rakuyakai before Chu showed up. However, looking at his actual fight, he gets eradicated pretty quickly. Sure, he has an intimidating introduction by barging into Team Urameshi's hotel room and breaking a coffee cup, but when it comes down to stepping into the ring for a fight, Hiei just burns him out of existence in half an episode. I feel like his demise is the most memorable thing about him, since it's both badass and funny. Hiei annihilates Zero with his Dragon of the Darkness Flame, and incinerates Zero against the wall, where only his outline was left. The irony is, Zero's only power that we knew about was fire manipulation, and he gets outdone by a darker, more dragon-shaped fire. For as powerful as Zero hyped himself up to be, we don't actually know how strong his flame is. He fills the arena demon with fire and can turn himself red to indicate he's real serious now, but the only reason he got so many hits on Hiei to begin with was because the Dragon of the Darkness Flame requires Hiei to take some hits to build up energy. If Hiei didn't feel like testing this new attack, I'm sure Zero would have just died to Hiei's sword or something like that. I like that as soon as Hiei gets up after Zero thought he knocked him out, Zero instantly switches from his look of cockiness to a look of bowel-avoiding fear on his face. It shows how weak he truly knows he is compared to the power of the higher class demons. He can talk a big game, but he probably needed a less ruthless opponent to show off against if he wanted to rise up in the demon world. Also, I like his pants. Most of the other non-humans in the tournament had some sort of elaborate or otherworldly outfit, and then he's just walking around in here with a t-shirt and khakis on, like he's about to go to the store. He's just wearing what's comfortable to him. I respect that. So for showing us that he's at most the second hottest fire in Demon World, and for being a cool-looking decoy final boss, Zero burns up the competition as the top one-off Yu Yu Hakusho villain. Now, what did you think? Were all these villains as tough as advertised, or were some of them deserving of even less screen time? Which short-lived villains did I not get a chance to talk about? There were definitely some that almost made the cut, so let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.